right, happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Point Spread. I'm Travis Justice. Over the next half hour, 40 minutes, we're going to dive into one game from the National Football League and 4 college football games. It's going to be a fun night, so sit back, and get ready to have a good time. Let's bring in our panelists. Of course, they're here each and every week. The man to my left is our Vegas insider. He's a good friend of the show, good friend of Omaha, and it's Mr. Scott Spreitzer. And the guy down below who gets the seat all to himself, he's like sitting on a throne, the one, the only Dr. Rob Zatechka. What's up, Doc?
How you guys doing?
Well, doing well. Look what's already coming in. The internet's going crazy tonight. Tiger Shark Diver says, goodbye, Malachi. So if you're following on all over the internet tonight, it's being reported, not confirmed, and we work in rumor and innuendo, that Malachi Coleman, receiver for the Huskers, is going to enter the transfer portal. You could have knocked me over with a feather with that. I'm not that shocked. If true, I'm really not that shocked.
I'm not. I guess, this was one of those things where I think, because he was originally not going to go to Nebraska, decided he's going to go to Nebraska, did play some last year as a true freshman, and the guy definitely has talent. I mean, you've got big, tall guy, massive amount of reach. He's a 4.4 40 guy. I mean, he's a track guy. Corey says, well, maybe he doesn't want to block. If there's been a knock against him, it's that he is kind of a track guy, and he's not out there for the physical contact. Go long, catch the long ball, and there you go. I mean, that's kind of been sort of the knock on him. And when this season came around and they had a number of portal guys come in, guys with a little bit more experience, all of a sudden he found himself on the bench a little bit. And I think the plan was from the get-go to redshirt him this season, which is, I mean, that's at this point kind of it. And I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't think he was this really heavily experienced football guy growing up. I don't think he started playing football till pretty late in the game.
I think you're right on that.
Yeah, which in this day and age, that means like 9th, 10th grade, maybe 8th grade. So he hasn't really it might be just an experience thing where they were thinking, let's redshirt this year. You're going to get some practice, kind of hone some hardcore fundamental football skills and go from there, which would make you think he'd be in for a breakout year next year. But maybe he just has kind of clashed with Rule clash. I mean, maybe he liked Satterfield and he's not so jazzed about Holgorsen. So there's a lot that play into this.
Didn't Holgorsen come into practice and say, why don't you guys block? I think I heard that one.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott, I look at this. This is just the way of the world today, right? I mean, you're going to see it all the time. Players are going to come. They're going to go. If they're not happy, if they're not getting the playing time they want, if they don't think they're going to advance, this is just the way of the world we're in.
I don't blame the players at all. This is the way it's been set up. Get your money. Go where you're going to play. Go where you can have a chance to make more money for yourself. You never know if you're going to make, the kind of money you can make right now as a top-notch college athlete anywhere else in the rest of your life. So I've got no problem with it. I'm worried about the betting aspect of it. Guess what he means? No shot against him. He hasn't played. He means zilch, zero, nothing. And unfortunately, a lot of individuals mean zilch to the point spread if they miss a game. Now, if it's a cluster situation, or we're going to talk a little bit later on this show about something that happened to one of the teams we're talking about, where it's not a quarterback, it's not a star wide receiver who is going to, I think, mean something to the game, but yet the betting hasn't reacted yet. We'll talk about that. So for me, it means nothing. You don't want to lose a 5-star quarterback. Guys, we've talked about this. I'm starting to hear too many people talking about it. I heard Danny Cannell yesterday talking about they better sell something about this offense to Raiola. He will get phone calls in the offseason. It's a matter of whether he takes those offers or not. So that definitely makes a difference. He's worth 5 points. People are going to dog him. They're going to dog me and say, oh, he hasn't played well. You know what? He's worth 5 or 6 points to the point spread right now if he were to step aside for another quarterback for Nebraska. So, as far as I'm concerned, good luck, man. I hope, and I mean that. I'm not being sarcastic. I want to see everybody do as well as they can and go to the place you need to be to live up to your potential. And maybe that's what he needs.
Sean's going to die on this hill. Please post on Blue Sky. No, we're not going to post on Blue Sky. We're just not going to do it. We've got 16.
I can maybe go take a look on Blue Sky.
No, Rob, don't, do not.
Why do you hate Blue Sky, Travis?
Because I'm not a liberal. That's why. I'm not a progressive. That's why.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's what it is. That's what
I thought it was the other side.
Listen, you have 16,000 followers on X. You don't need to go to Blue Sky. You're fine on X.
You just told me it was because of politics. You didn't say it was because of a follower number, Travis.
Well, then you got to start from zero. I don't want you to start from zero. You got a built-in audience.
Well, now you're talking.
I told you already,
you're talking followers again. You said it was politics. Which one is it?
And I got to tell you, Travis, there is
Trav's MAGA. Trav's like. You are totally MAGA. You're like MAGA.
I've even got no problem with that.
You're like MAGA in libertarian clothing.
Oh boy, we don't want to tell Rob where I went there this year, but I'll tell you what. You know what? I'm open to everybody coming on board. We got a product to sell here. It doesn't cost anybody to watch this.
I actually
got everybody's involved.
I ain't moving anybody off. I was just one of those like I did shit. I'll go. Wants me to post on Blue Sky. I'll go take a look. Yeah, I didn't know what it was until Sean. What was it? 2 weeks ago, Sean asked us about Blue Sky.
I got to find me a dark MAGA hat and send it to Rob. That's what I got to do.
His wife would kill him.
I don't. You know what? I swear. Like Trav wants people to think he's centrist. Mm-hmm. But he's MAGA.
Oh my God!
I'm like dead center. I'm
as dead center as they come.
When are you guys going to do the Trump dance tonight? That's what I want to know. I've been seeing it all weekend. Oh, there we go.
I heard. And how about the NFL coming out and say, "Well, we're going to allow the Trump dance because that's not political." It's not political. They do it. Can you imagine that coming to the National Football League disciplinary office? Hey, are we going to do anything about this? And it's just like, nah, we're not even going to touch this one. And it's the right call, right? I mean,
I guess I'd say it's the right call in the sense that it's one of those. Okay, I'm not sure what a Biden dance would be. Him taking a nap. I can make fun of both sides.
See, yeah.
Yeah, it's him in a Barca lounger snoozing. The
NFL smart guys.
Yeah, let's say there was a distinctive Biden dance, and guys did that. I wouldn't care.
Right.
No, either would I.
It's like, why should I care about the other one?
I hate them all when they cost me a cover. I don't care what dance you're doing.
It's a bad
and I love them all when they cover for me.
he hates the bad beats. Hey, if you want to work with Scott Spreitzer all season long, well, there's not much of the season left, but you do have a lot of the NFL season and, of course, college basketball, NBA, NHL. Just text the word Doc Talk, the number 29022, and get the free $60 trial of the premium member picks from Scott. Or you can visit docsports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left-hand side of the website. This is a call-in show as well. I see lots of comments coming in through Facebook and YouTube, but you can also call the show at 402-543-5556. That's 402-543-5556. So we've got some good games tonight, and let's start in the National Football League, shall we? We got the Ravens and the Chargers. Then we go on to college football where we got Brigham Young at Arizona State. That's an intriguing game. BYU still in the playoffs. I don't think it's going to be a playoff team, but they were kind of slotted yesterday when the college football playoff poll came out. Look out for Colorado, maybe the hottest team in the Big 12 right now, in playing one of the hottest teams in the Big 12. That would be Kansas. The big game this weekend, of course, is Indiana and Ohio State. And Scott, I have a feeling that's the game you were talking about with injury. I have a feeling, maybe. Yep. And then, of course, the Badgers take on the Huskers Saturday at 2:30. At Memorial Stadium. So let's go to the first game today, shall we? It's in the National Football League. The Ravens and Chargers. Interesting matchup. The Ravens lost at Pittsburgh last week. The Chargers got a win. The Ravens a 2.5-point favorite on the road with the over-under at 51.
I got to say one thing, first of all, about Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, and Mike Tomlin. It's unbelievable the way that Mike Tomlin has this guy's number. He's got John Harbaugh's number. He's got Lamar Jackson's number. When you talk about Tomlin and that staff, I mean, they beat him 18-16. I think Pittsburgh for the second time this year relied on 6 field goals, but they made Lamar look like a second string rookie. Again, they've won like 9 of the last 10 against Baltimore. So I did a video last week that I posted on Twitter, and I talked about how much I like the under on the video and all that kind of good stuff, and mentioned a couple of those things. Didn't have Pittsburgh, didn't have Baltimore, but we saw what they can do again against Lamar Jackson. So, and I'm a Lamar fan for the most part. Meanwhile, the Chargers, they get out to that big lead, 21-point lead over Cincy. And the next thing you know, there's, a minute to go and they're tied. They end up finding a way to win. 26 seconds left. Jim Harbaugh 0-2 against John Harbaugh as NFL head coaches. We'll see if he can break through here. Baltimore could have beaten Pittsburgh, by the way, last week. So I don't want to take too much away from the Ravens. But Justin Tucker, my gosh, this guy was one of the world's greatest kickers in our lifetime and beyond. And all of a sudden, he's hit the wall the last season and a half. Can't make field goals. I mean, you can't trust him anymore. He missed a couple of field goals against Pittsburgh after being one of the best of all time. He now kind of stinks. At least he's iffy. And the best yards per play margin in the NFL does belong to the Baltimore Ravens. The Chargers are so in the same metric. They've enjoyed the easiest schedule in the NFL rated by bettors. And listen, I think the Chargers might be Jim Harbaugh tough, and Baltimore can be had through the air. But I think both teams are going to score their share of points in this one. And unlike last week's Baltimore-Pittsburgh battle, I think this one goes over that total of 51, probably lands around 55 to 57 points, guys.
Is this a game you'd bet on?
Yeah, in fact, there is one side that I'm looking at right now, but I want to dig a little bit deeper because it is the Monday night game, and it's Wednesday as we're talking about this. So I've got a few days to go. Want to read some things over the next 2 days when it comes to practices, and I believe it or not, I do that stuff. I'm reading stuff right up until the day before the game in college, and usually till Friday when they're done practicing in the NFL. So a couple things I want to see yet, but I do like the over here, and I will be on the over as far as a bet is concerned, and I might jump in here on a side if I get the right info in the next 24 to 48 hours.
All right, let's jump into the college game, shall we? It's a big one down in Phoenix as BYU visits Arizona State, a 2:30 game on ESPN. Sun Devils at home, a 3-point favorite, over under at 48.5. A loss here by BYU would essentially knock them out of the Big 12 title game, or at least I think it would. Sure. Arizona State goes to Kansas State last week and wins. I mean, that was impressive.
Yeah. We talked about BYU last week going into the Kansas game. I think we talked about it on the show and mentioned that, BYU has been sliding by. They've been the opposite of Nebraska. BYU's been winning 1-score games in the closing quarter. And listen, they've got 4 wins this year by a grand total of 13 points. Kind of caught up to them last week. As far as ASU, has any team flown under the radar in Power 5 college football or Power 4 college football this year like Arizona State? Guys, this team is 8-2 on the season. As you mentioned, Travis, they just went into the Little Apple and they win by 10, 24-14. They were actually leading that game 24-6 at one point of the contest. They got Sam Levitt, the Michigan State transfer, 17 touchdowns, 4 picks. He's got 9 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions in his last 3 games, 3 touchdowns in each of those games. But I want everybody who maybe doesn't spend all their day, all their night watching Southwest Desert football to watch this game. And when you do, you got to check out Cam Skattebo. I'm going to tell you right now, I know it looks like Skattebo. He pronounces it Skattebo. This guy is a wrecking ball. He's 5'10", he's thick, and he runs as well as anybody in college football right now, and he bowls people over, but he can also get away from guys. And Cam Skattebo right now has over 1,000 yards rushing, 5.5 yards per carry, and that includes missing a game, those 1,074 yards this year. So here's the thing. The 2 teams that beat ASU this year, they both not shut down Skattebo, but they slowed down Cam Skattebo. BYU isn't bad against the run, but they're nothing special either. Listen, guys, the Big 12, we all know, is mediocre. Don't want to ruffle any feathers. I'm just telling you the facts. BYU is 7th in the Big 12 in my power ratings. 7th. I don't just look at wins. That's where I've got them right now. But there's a bunch of teams that are all cluttered around each other in that top 7. It's all pretty close in that conference. I have ASU power rated 4.5 points better than BYU and Tempe. Right now, the line's 3. I think the value's on Arizona State. It's
interesting. What is your highest power ranked Big 12 team? Because you got Colorado at like 16, I believe, in the college football playoff poll. Iowa State's at 22. BYU's 14, I believe, but would still make the playoff. What's your highest power? Because I was actually talking about you on the radio earlier this week, Scott, about how none of these Big 12 teams are very well power ranked.
My highest power rated team is Colorado. Right now, they're 16th. But let me tell you the difference between a team that could be playing for the Big 12 title and a team that still has to win a couple to get to a bowl game, Kansas. I've got Kansas 24th in my power ratings.
Really?
It was a lot of bad luck, a lot of self-inflicted wounds early in the season. And we'll talk about them in a bit, but Kansas is that close to being 9-1. And that's how we have to look from things from a betting perspective. We can't just say, oh, they're 4-6. They stink. Or, they lost to this team. They stink. We dig into it, man. We do metrics. We've talked about them here. Yards per play, success rate, metric rates, things like that. Well, Kansas adds up to one of the top 25 teams in college football from a betting perspective.
Talk about Arizona State, their coach, Kenny Dillingham. The dude looks like he's 14 years old. You guys ever, he's one of the least known head coaches out there, and he looks like he's 14 years old.
Oh, you're not, and they've been flying under the radar all year. Nobody talks about Arizona State outside of betting circles, really, for the most part.
But that's one of those things that goes back to, I think the expectations were so low going into the year that, it's one of those nobody ever really circled around. But they've kind of been down for a while here. You look at what, God, was it Herm Edwards was there?
Yeah, Herm,
right. It was just one of those, you would have thought he would have been able to do something from an experience and knowledge standpoint, recruiting even.
Mm-hmm.
And God, they just fell flat on their face. And then all of a sudden this year, they've just kind of exploded. But I think that's just an expectation thing coming in. So,
Scott, I don't know if you see the comment there. Frankie wants to know, so wins don't matter in the power rankings?
Of course they matter, but it's on how you won the game. Seriously. And that's how you become a winning bettor or a guy who's betting 5-team parlays, and that's not an insult of any kind, but did you see the way Kansas was losing those games early this year?
Yeah,
did you think UNLV is a better football team than Kansas? UNLV is good. They're not power rated, where Kansas is by anybody, not just me. I'm talking from a sports book director's perspective, from a bettor's perspective. That's how you make lines. It's how you get the wins. We don't care who plays. We care about the math. That's all we care about. And that's both the guys who are setting the numbers and the guys who are trying to beat those numbers. We always say the old adage is you don't bet teams, you bet numbers. And it reigns true just about every sport you're betting on. And so for Kansas, for instance, just a real quick example, if they played Illinois again, not my line, they'd be favored. If they played UNLV, they'd be right down the line every game they lost. The only game that they lost by margin was TCU, and that was a close game late in the third quarter. So now they've covered 4 straight spreads, hottest team in the Big 12, along with Colorado.
So I compared you. I said you were Matt Damon in the movie The Martian over on the radio this week. I said, I said, you remember when Matt Damon got stranded and he's like, I'm going to have to math the shit out of this. And I go, that's Scott Spreitzer. He's going to have to math the shit out of this. And that's what he does. I've got to
watch that movie. I've heard nothing but good things about it. Now
You've never seen The Martian?
I've never seen The Martian.
Oh, God, it's such a good movie.
It is so good. So good. While we're on the subject of Kansas, they are at home. This is going to be, I believe, at Gia Field, Arrowhead Stadium. Dion and Primetime come to town. Primetime says the Buffaloes have not played their best game yet. They're playing really good football. They keep winning. A good win last week. They are taking on Kansas. I think this could be one of the better games to watch. It's a 9:15 on Saturday night? Is that correct? Or is that a misprint by me? I think it's a misprint. I can find out real
fast. I don't have the start time in front of me to bring it up.
But
anyway,
how do you see? You got Colorado 16th in your power rankings. You got Kansas up there. How do you see this one?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say that, I got to clarify something. I don't want a guy who asks a question to think that he's getting picked on. That was by no way me trying to pick on somebody. Just trying to give you a quick to the point answer on what we look for. And I also, it's, by the way, it's 3:30 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, that's my bad. It is my misprint.
But I wanted to mention also, there's been very few teams that you bet on when you don't worry about the number. And that happened to be Dr. Rob's teams in the mid-90s. Some of those Nick Saban Alabama teams. Okay, that was, you bet on the team, damn it. You don't just bet on the number, even though their numbers were increased back then. There wasn't a whole lot of value on Nebraska in their heyday, but you still won. But as far as this particular game, Colorado and Kansas, so I just mentioned I got both of these teams power rated in my top 25. It's not just me. It's guys who do this for a living. We've all got them in our top 25, both of these teams. The lowest I've seen Kansas has been 27 this week after the win over BYU. And these are steady, gradual climbs or declines in teams' power ratings. It's not like a team with, like, I'll give you a perfect example, and I don't mean to ramble here, but I want to give an example. The Duke Blue Devils in college basketball last week in the Associated Press were 6th. They lose to top 20 Kentucky, game they could have easily won. They go from 6 to 12. Are you absolutely kidding me? That's why I just look at these AP ratings and I just shake my head. I have Duke right now power rated 4th. They were 3rd before they lost to Kentucky. Ken Palm, best power ratings in college baskets, 15 years running. He went from 4th to 5th. I went from 3rd to 4th. AP goes from 6 to 12. That's the kind of stuff you got to stay away from when you're betting, because you'll be influenced by guys who aren't thinking about this from a betting perspective.
Because writers don't know shit.
Well, it's not that. They don't know power ratings. They don't know betting. They don't know sports betting. They're trying hard. I give them credit. Since all this crap is getting legalized over the last few years, they're trying to get more into it, and I love it. But the bottom line is they still aren't there quite yet when it comes to voting for teams in any sport, in any league. But anyway, they'll get there. As far as this game is concerned, I think we all heard by now that, Michael Irvin saying that he's on good sources and he knows Deion well, that if Shedeur goes to the Cowboys, Deion's followed him to the Cowboys. I saw Deion the other day saying, I will have a definite interest in who's drafting my son. And it sounds Archie Manning-like when Eli was going to go to the Chargers. And Archie said, you draft my kid in San Diego at the time. He goes, we ain't showing up. And so that sounds like Deion's kind of thinking the same way. But as far as this game is concerned, there are still some 3s out there, but about 85% of the books have 2.5. I told you earlier tonight, Kansas just a few plays away from 9-1. They did lose to TCU by double digits. Kansas led that game to go with 12 minutes to go. They're so well coached that I was glad to see no one jumped ship when it came to the Jayhawks. And we were talking about them a few weeks ago before they had started this little winning streak about they have the right coach to keep this team together to where they don't jump ship and kind of fold up tent, look towards next year and feel sorry for themselves. So again, I've got the Big 12 as a mediocre conference. 9 of the 16 teams I've got power rated from 16th to 38th. That means on any given Saturday, one of those top 9 Big 12 teams could beat the other. And I did also mention them where I have Colorado, where I have Kansas, despite being 4 and 6. Their corners, Bryant and Dotson, talking about the Jayhawks defense, are good. And I don't know that Colorado's wide receivers are going to be able to find separation on a consistent basis, because remember, that offensive line, when they match up against decent opponents, has not been good, talking about Colorado. Better than last year. They've given up 32 sacks. They gave up 50-plus last year, but they're 133rd on the ground, rushing yards per game. They were sacked 20 times by Nebraska, Baylor, and Kansas State combined. So, you got to factor that into the equation. I'm going to call for a slight upset here. Kansas over Colorado at Arrowhead this weekend.
Wow. Look at that. That would, I tell you what, the Big 12, you always hear like the NBA wants the Lakers in. Major League Baseball did cartwheels when it was the Dodgers and the Yankees. You got to believe the Big 12 wants Colorado in just for the TV factor of Deion Sanders, don't you?
Yeah, Rob, don't they have to stay away from a referee? 100%. I agree.
So, your Shedeur comment about with Michael Irvin, he says, so you're saying the Cowboys are losing to get the first pick?
I don't think the players are, but I don't think Jerry Jones in the front office really minds at this point.
Do you think Shedeur, okay, here's a question. Is Shedeur a top pick?
I think he is. I mean, my own personal
feeling. Number 1?
Top quarterback. I think he is, to me.
Travis Hunter might be the number 1 pick.
Yeah,
see, I mean,
Travis Hunter, number 1 pick.
It's kind of weird that we're talking about the number 1 pick, and I'm sitting here going, well, it's not Shedeur, it's this other Colorado player.
Yeah. So, and I agree with Travis Hunter being number 1. I think Shedeur is going to be the number 1 quarterback. And every time I watch the kid, man, it's not just run around like playground football, and he's got a bad offensive line, but he makes
I do think
like that.
I said it before the Nebraska game. I said it after. I think Shedeur is a very good quarterback.
Yeah.
He really is.
And they're playing really good football right now. So that's going to be the game to watch. 2:30 on Saturday. The big game is 11 o'clock in the morning on Fox. You've got Indiana unbeaten coming off a bye week. They're going to be at Ohio State. Indiana is the Cinderella story. They're the one that everybody's talking about. But get this, a 13-point dog. 13-point dog over under at 51.5. Is that 13? The 13.5 is, or 13 is a big number, Scott.
Yeah, a lot of 13s, a lot of 13.5. So it's been holding under 14. Listen, I'll tell you why I was going to jump on Ohio State and tell you why I'm not now. First of all, I had Ohio State power rated 9.5 points better than Indiana on a neutral field. So then you factor in what you think of Ohio State's home field. Well, we saw against Nebraska, it didn't matter a whole lot, but most of the time it has over the last decade plus. But here's why I've decided to jump off. I mentioned earlier in the show that an individual player outside of a quarterback doesn't really matter against the spread. In fact, the individual that I can think of that mattered to the point spread outside of quarterback the most or in a consistent manner was Troy Polamalu. That's how long it's been. When this guy was out, it mattered to the line, and we haven't seen too many like that. Lawrence Taylor would have been a guy who mattered to the line. And so we don't really see that much anymore outside of quarterback unless there's a cluster situation. Well, we found out late last night or yesterday afternoon, which would have been Tuesday, that, this Remington candidate, Seth McLaughlin at center for Ohio State, he ends up tearing his Achilles in practice yesterday. And it's a situation where he's out for the year. On top of that, you got to remember they lost left tackle Josh Simmons before the Nebraska game. And we saw how much they struggled on the ground, losing him. They finally kind of got a good feel after they switched things around, moved some guys, shuffled some guys up front on the offensive line. But the anchor, the best offensive lineman since Simmons' injury was, of course, Seth McLaughlin. He's no longer there. He played in 565 snaps this year.
Wow.
So you take that out of the mix. His backup is a kid named Josh Padilla. But I hear Ryan Day is going to kind of shuffle things around a bit and go with last year's starter, who McLaughlin supplanted in the offseason. He's going to be the starter this year. Here's some numbers from these teams. Last year, before McLaughlin became the starting center this year, they averaged 4.2 yards per carry. Since making that change at center, they now average 5.25 yards per carry on the season. I think it's a scary spot now for the Buckeyes. So it's not so much an individual as it is kind of a cluster problem now up front on the offensive line, because they're having to bring guys back that haven't played much this year, that have been standing on the sideline. They're having to shuffle guys around up front on the offensive line, try to protect the quarterback's blind side, with guys who haven't played left tackle a whole lot or a bit on the depth chart. The scary part about Indiana, and I mean that in a negative way towards Indiana, and the reason I was kind of looking to back the Buckeyes. First of all, Ohio State does have the better players. We know that, the deeper roster. Indiana's got quickness at wide receiver, and maybe they would have beat this team, whether, no matter who's playing or not. But the bottom line is they're 10-0. They played one team that's bowl eligible, and that's Washington. That's it. So I don't want to fault them too much, but it has to be slipped into the handicap there. That was a 3-point game in the third quarter in Bloomington. Washington actually outgained Indiana by the end of the game by a few yards. Indiana had a pick six. They had, 147 return yards. That was really the difference. And then against Michigan, 14 first downs, 40 yards, 28 carries. I can't jump on Ohio State for the reason that they're now messed up in the interior of the offensive line. A little bit, I'll kind of be rooting a little bit for Indiana here, just to throw this whole thing into a big circus, because a lot of people have the Buckeyes ranked number one ahead of Oregon in their power ratings right now. I don't, but a lot of guys I respect do.
Rob, how important is that center position when you lose a guy that's played 500 plus snaps, and just how important is that position?
I mean, I think it's big if you don't have a really good guy to slide into that spot to replace him. I mean, it's I think in Ohio State's situation, and I think Scott's already kind of hit on this, that offensive line was already a little patchwork. That left tackle spot was a massive weakness for Ohio State for a couple of weeks there. When they finally moved the one guy over, I think he came from guard over to tackle, and he was arguably their second best offensive lineman. They moved over to left tackle, and that kind of shored up that spot at left tackle a bit. And when that happened, it was like, okay, they're going to be pretty good now. That offensive line, that solidified things, so they're going to be okay. Well, now you've lost that center. I don't know. That's going to be a tough one for them to be able to overcome. You talk about him coming into that position. And the difference was going from what did you say, like basically 4.2 yards a carry per play to 5 point. Basically, it's like a yard and a half per play.
Right.
Which statistically, that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, if you want to look at it percentage-wise, that's almost a 25% increase per play. In terms
and I'm going to look
yardage.
at it. Look how much Ohio State goes out of the shotgun, right? I'm going to pay attention to bad snaps.
Exactly. That's a lot of variables to throw in there. That's a great
let's say
point.
4th and 2 at the 50. When Ohio State's going to go for it normally, now you got to think twice. I really believe that. You actually got to forget about what the metrics say, sabermetrics, all that kind of crap. And here you go. The math says to go for it on 4th and 2 at midfield. This is one of those things we've talked about. Sometimes you got to, if your offensive line isn't playing well, who cares what the metrics say? Your offensive line is stinking it up. That, I think, outweighs what the math says in that situation. So I think we're going to find out pretty early on if this is going to be a game that Ohio State's going to be in trouble throughout the entire 4 quarters. I really do. So, when I look at that, I keep thinking that I liked Ohio State. The thing but I don't now. The thing that surprises me is that the line hasn't really moved. And they're almost like not moving this number, bettors, as though this is one guy up front on the offensive line. And we just talked about that. It's more than that. And then Rob just told you why it matters when there's more than one guy banged up front.
All right, Scott, everybody wants to know, is Nebraska going to be bowl eligible after Saturday? They are at home, 3:00 game on Fox against Wisconsin, 2.5-point favorite, 42.5 is your over-under. Are the Huskers going to be bowl eligible?
Talking this year? I'm just kidding.
Yes.
That's
God, that hurt.
Oh, I'm a Husker fan. It hurt to say it, Rob.
Well, hold on. Let's bring Rob up. Let's just go ahead and make Rob full screen here. His psyche is shot. His psyche is shot. He's referring to losing all the time.
I'm referring to the fact that, these guys have, in my opinion, so much probably self-generated pressure to get this one last win that, that's all you're thinking of. You're not going out there and thinking about playing football. You're going out there and getting bowl eligible. And if you're worried about being bowl eligible, you're not thinking about playing football, and that's a bad thing.
And we're talking about 2 teams without an offensive identity, which we've mentioned throughout the course of the season. Luke Fickell comes in, he hires his no longer offensive coordinator because he wants to change things up on how Wisconsin attacks. Yet they have players recruited who don't play to that kind of game. And this is what happened to Nebraska 20 years ago under Callahan. You got Frank Solich. He knows the identity of Nebraska. He's gone. Here comes the next coach. He's going to change things up and do his own thing. And
go West Coast with Joe Daly.
There you go. The coast of Joe Daly.
Wow, look at that.
But, I'm sitting and I'm like, who do you trust here? Wisconsin, they're off a great game against, maybe not a great game as far as they were concerned, but a close loss to Oregon where they played, I don't want to say well enough to win because, listen, I'm going to throw some numbers at you. Wisconsin had a chance to beat Oregon. We'll leave it at that. They gained 226 yards on 3.6 yards per play, the Badgers. They were 1 for 12 in third down conversions. You know what it was to me more than anything? It was the Ducks on the road playing their 8th straight week since they had any bye, all in Big Ten conference action, traveling around, all that kind of stuff. They looked sluggish to me from the start of that game. So, again, Wisconsin barely got over 200 yards in the contest, couldn't average 4 yards per play. I'm not talking yards per carry. I'm talking per play. So I don't think they played that great of a football game. I think Nebraska played a better game against Ohio State than Wisconsin did against Oregon. So anyway, they had their chance. They let it get by. I wanted to bring up some notes here on my computer that I had. Nebraska's been shut out 3 times in the second half this season. That's 30% of their games, 3 times. Wow. They've scored 7 or fewer points in the second half 5 times, half their games. Take away the Purdue game, Nebraska has 6 second-half touchdowns in their other 9 games. 6 in 9. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. I don't know, Rob. It's like, to me, that's the coaches more than the players. Satterfield's gone. Bring Holgorsen in. Has he had enough time to turn things around? I'm not so sure. Listen, I laid points with Nebraska a few weeks ago. I forget who it was against, and they beat me. That was my one time this year.
UCLA.
Outside of Colorado, that's the only time that I jumped on Nebraska laying anything. I'm 1-1. I've lost the VIG. I've had enough of Nebraska. I'm going to stay away from this game for the second straight week, staying away from Nebraska game, and I'm going to root like hell for them as long as they're playing hard and have a chance to win this game, just like I did when they were at the Coliseum last week.
David writes in, getting to a bowl game is one of the first questions they asked Dana. Pressure coming from all over on the kids to get that last win. You've been talking about that, Rob.
Well, that's what I say. Psyche is shot. I mean, Scott, I don't know if there's a betting metric for that in terms of teams in these tight situations trying to get to a bowl game, make a playoff, whatever. But God, I can't think it doesn't play into this stuff. But I mean, this is one of those games where I just kind of what I've learned from, like the thing I learned from talking to Scott every week is like the value in this stuff. And there's like no value in this bet.
Yep.
I mean, it's just there's zero predictability here with these guys. And that's what worries me. You've got no offensive identity.
For either
with
side.
with either team. So it's kind of one of those Lord knows who shows up for either team.
Yeah, when they fired Phil Longo at Wisconsin this week, they talked about running the air raid offense, and I went, huh? What, you ran an air raid offense? I had no idea. I didn't know you ran an offense. Period.
That's kind of a sad thing when you look at that. I mean, and Scott talks about you look at that second half offensive productivity for Nebraska. It's been non-existent. And I mean, you go back to the Colorado game and you almost kind of hope that at the time you were looking at that going like, okay, well, maybe they kind of called the dogs off a little bit. Maybe Nebraska didn't have the time of possession there in the third quarter to really get anything done. And now you look back on it over week after week after week, and you're like, yeah, this is a team that opponents go in at halftime, figure out what you're doing, and shut it down.
Yep.
And that's a bad place to be in. And that's probably why I was going to say why Satterfield got fired. He hasn't been fired yet, but it's not like he's sticking around. So that's why he is no longer calling plays, is because of that.
Let me ask you this. You're the only one of us three who's played major college football and have trophies sitting around your house there. I want to ask you a question based on what we're talking about. So you see that they've scored 6 touchdowns in the second half of 9 games, throwing out Purdue. So what percentage do you put that, the second half collapse or being, out adjusted on the coaching staff, offensive coaches? How much do you put on the players? I mean, because the defense hasn't played badly in those second halves. It's been a lack of offense.
No, and I get that. And I mean, how much of that is defensive coaching, though, on the defensive side? So I do think I put a lot of it on the coaching staff, because it's one of those things where you do have different models of coaching. And I mean, I think good college coaches make a lot of adjustments at halftime. I think they go in, they look at what they're doing, they're looking at what works, what's not working. And I think you've got to show up and at the start of the third quarter, and you've got to have some new wrinkles. You've got to have some adjustments that take into account the opponent's going to be trying to do the same thing. So I think it's a huge indication that there are some weaknesses on this coaching staff that these guys need to make adjustments for.
Shuck says if Nebraska doesn't win Saturday, he'll eat a $7 Taco Bell box and drink 2 Steel Reserves on the live next week. So that's what's going to happen. They're just going to get drunk and eat Taco Bell.
Okay, the Taco Bell's pretty tasty. It's just not on the live stream that we don't want to be around you. It's going to be about 3 hours later.
Hey, if you want to work with Scott Spreitzer on a daily basis or yearly basis, you can do that just by texting the word Doc Talk to the number 29022. $60 on the upper left-hand side of the website. Gentlemen, always good to catch up. Man, this was week 13. The season has flown right on by. We got a couple weeks left. We got conference championship games. Then, of course, the college football playoff. So, another fast week.
Almost
this
over.
time of year, it's flying by.
It
College
really.
basketball now, man, and of course the NFL, the king of all sports.
Hey, I'm telling you what, that Maui Invitational next week's going to be a good one to watch.
Oh,
There's some
can't
great
wait.
games.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, for Scott Spreitzer, for Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We will talk to you next week on Behind the Point Spread. See you, everybody.